But I remember I was so stunned by this news. Stunned isn't the word. I was so overjoyed, really, that my spirit, I'll call it that, my presence began to do a series of flips in the air. And the being was laughing, like in joy. And I was connecting with this joy. And as I think about it, the other beings were sharing this joy as well. It was all one thing. And that was, and people ask me, well, what was the meaning of life? And I just really want to tell you it's this.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Awakening to Love podcast. I am the Ascension Coach, James Valentine, and I am back with another amazing NDE experiencer, Wayne Morrison. He's going to share the age and the circumstances around his NDE. He's going to describe a presence or the presence. I don't know if there's a plural form for that, but the many presence he saw and what they told him was coming next. He's going to share what he saw, how he felt, and what he heard that will absolutely blow your mind. He's going to share something about God that will absolutely mind-blowing surprise you, actually. And then he's going to share the answer to what he received to the question that I think we have all asked, whether we were a little one, or even to this day, we're still trying to figure out this question. He's going to share the answer he received to what is the meaning of life. So, having said all of that, I am going to turn it over to this amazing soul, Wayne Morrison. Wayne, it's all on you, my friend.
It's nice to meet you, James. I'm glad to have the opportunity to speak to you about this. So my NDE happened over a half a century ago. I was 17 years old. It was 1972. I was at a party and I had taken some medicine and I also was drinking. And I always like to be clear about this. I'm not one of the people who can say I was pronounced dead. That never happened in my case. What happened was at one moment I was at this party and feeling a little funny. And the next moment I heard a very deep rumbling sound, which as I tell the story, it sounds like it would be terrifying, but it was actually very comforting. And then as I heard it, I began to move through this dark place. And again, instead of being scared, I was in awe and comfort. And I know I probably described it, I'm sure I have, as a tunnel, because we tend to do that, because I was moving so fast that I could not begin to calculate. And when I say I was aware, vividly aware, that I was present, but I didn't really take stock of it until later to realize I wasn't looking at my hands or my body. I didn't see any of that. And as I moved forward through this expanse, I could see a light way off in the distance, very small, but extremely bright. And I moved toward that light. And as I did, I got out of this expanse, and below me were valleys and flowers and magnificent flowers. And I was not somebody who was into flowers at that time, or even now, really. But I was looking down, and these flowers were moving, and they were alive with some sort of light energy that was inside of them and behind them, all around them. And they were playing music, or at least that's how I perceived it, because the air was filled with music. And I could sense, and again, I don't know how I sensed this, but they were there to support me. And I think I mean that literally, in the air, but also it was a welcoming, a great welcoming. And that light off in the distance started to get closer. And as it did, over to my right, I looked up, and there were three, what I would call, beings. They were very tall. And I believe that at least one of them was a female, or I perceived the person as a female, because their features were not distinct, but they had a body shape, and they were very tall, and they were very welcoming. And they let me know that I was safe, basically, and that I was about to meet a being of a very high order. And I need to pause here, because your viewers may have heard this from various people, but there is no talking there. There is what some people have described as telepathy. I never thought of it as that because it's a deeper thing than just knowing what is in somebody's mind. It was as if anything you wanted answered before you could even wonder what the question was, you fulfilled the answer yourself. So if I said, what is it like to be James? I became James. I might have become James' mother, father, a myriad of ways that just, it was shocking to me, but also it seemed normal. It just seemed completely normal. And as the light off in the distance that I originally saw got closer, it got brighter and brighter until it filled everything around me. And it was a male presence as I perceived him. Again, indistinct features. I didn't see eyes, but it was as if a man were standing there. And it was as if he were welcoming me in the most intimate way. It's hard to describe because nothing in this world really adds up to what happened there, and the level of comfort and acceptance and non-judgment. The only time I ever felt it in my life. And I remember it vividly. I remember it more clearly. And actually, let me interject here if I can. This was not a foggy sort of delusion or a dream. This was so real that it was more real than you and I communicating right now. It was much more real than anything in my life. But he began to accept questions from me, and I was just bubbling over with questions because I was only 17 years old, and as I look back on it now, I realize I was a soul searcher. I wouldn't have called myself that, but I was looking for answers that when I looked around at the kids around me, they were into baseball and football, and I always felt like an outcast because I wasn't, and I was always searching for these things that they never even would dream of talking about. And if I tried to talk about them, well, it wouldn't have gone well, I don't think. But the presence began to answer these questions. And I had many questions. I remember two, the clearest. One was, I wanted to know if there were other planets that had life in the universe. And before I could even have that thought, I was like catapulted so fast, I can't really even calculate. It wouldn't be possible. And it's like you're moving, and yet you're comfortable, and you're moving faster than anything you could imagine. And I looked down on a couple of different planets. And when I say look down, I mean that like literally. I wasn't down on the street level. And one of these planets, I remember, they looked very ancient to me, like I would describe the Greeks or the Romans. And another one seemed more modern to me. And again, it's from a distance, so I didn't really get to go in and participate or overhear what was being said, but it was clearly different places. They were different places. And when I came back from there, I had the most important question I had. Let me back up one more time. Moving through that tunnel, I had a thought in my head that overrode everything. And it was this joyous idea that I was about to learn the secret meaning of life. Something that, wow. So I burst out and said, what is that? What is the secret meaning of life? And the being portrayed to me filled me with, and this is always hard to describe, love. Because up to that point, I was just like a lot of kids, 17 years old, and you loved your mother, you loved your sisters and brothers, or maybe you didn't, but anyway, it wasn't that kind of a love at all. It was this all burning, encompassing love that lit everything, not just there, but everywhere. It was, I can't describe it. So I'm going to stop at that point. But I remember I was so stunned by this news. Stunned isn't the word. I was so overjoyed, really, that my spirit, I'll call it that, my presence began to do a series of flips in the air. And the being was laughing, like in joy. And I was connecting with this joy. And as I think about it, the other beings were sharing this joy as well. It was all one thing. And and people ask me, well, what was the meaning of life? And I just really want to tell you it's this: love. but it can't be communicated with 4 letters. It can't be communicated. As good as so many songs and poems are, it cannot be communicated on the level it was communicated there. That is the answer, though. Love, pure love, a love beyond, a love that burns so bright that it just drives everything in the universe. And then at some point, I began to move to a black expanse. I asked more questions, but I'm not going to bog down the conversation with them. Again, if I asked, what is it like to be the ocean? I would become the clouds. I would become the ocean. I would become the fish. It was, and I mean instantly. You would not just have knowledge, you would have that, but you would have the experience, which is, I know it sounds hard to describe. It can't be done here, or at least I haven't done it here. Let me put it that way. So I moved to this black expanse. And again, this sounds very dreary, but it wasn't at all. It was exciting. I knew something important was happening. And this tablet, and I think people today think of tablets like an electronic device, but I mean like a giant stone tablet, came spinning in front of me and stopped. And I saw the creation of the world and all of its existence in a millisecond. And I always like to interject this: no, I don't know how the world ends. If I was given that information, I assume I was, it was withheld from me. But I saw a lot of other things, and they happened. I remember a lot of other things, and it happened so quickly. There was growth, creation, civilizations. I remember, and I should have been horrified. I think I might have been a little terrified. Armies after army clashing with each other in such a violent way. And when it happened, so quickly. And I began to understand that the whole history of the world was one of birth, growth, and then this violent fighting for things. And anyway, I'll leave it at that. And I had made up my mind at that point, after I saw this, that I wasn't going to go back. I was 17. I had come home, and there was no way I was leaving. And I don't recall how I communicated that, but I was told, well, you have to go back. There are important reasons, or an important reason. It wasn't, again, it's not English, it's not language. It's a language of the heart. It's hard to describe. But I was told I have to go back. And I think I pretty much dug my heels in, my metaphysical heels. And I wasn't going to leave. And then I got surrounded by these beings of light. And I've tried to remember the number through the years. I don't know if it was hundreds or thousands. I remember they were magnificently glowing, and they seemed so large. And they surrounded me, and I realized they were sending me back. And I guess I accepted it. And as they did this, they were singing they were singing improvisational music that was so filled with beauty. I've never heard anything before or since like it. And it was all in support of me, which, okay, wow. There I am, I'm 17, I'm heading back. And next thing I know, I'm in a bathroom in this apartment. I was at this party. I had never been in this place before. And I was, and please understand this, I want to be really clear. I think it would be a horrible idea for anybody to end their life prematurely. But I was 17, and I somehow understood, and I don't know why I understood, that if I killed myself, I believed anyway, that I would go back there. I've since come to the conclusion that that's not where I was going to go. I probably would have made a big detour. And I had a razor blade in my hand, and I was looking to slash my wrist, not in anxiety or fear, the opposite. I was trying to get out of this life and into that life. And the only time in my life that I've had what I would call some sort of mystical experience, a deep, resonant male voice said, no. I dropped the razor blade. Somebody opened the door and said, hey guys, he's in here. They were obviously looking for me. And I'm 17, and I go to my girlfriend, who's been my wife ever since. We've been married over 50 years. And I tell her, and she goes, oh, okay, because she knew that I wasn't somebody who was prone to anything like this. And moving fast forward, we got married. I was only 18. She was only 17. We had a baby, and I joined the Air Force. And while I'm in Denver, Colorado in the Air Force, there's a talk show, and I can't really remember what it was. I want to say Merv Griffin back then, but it was a talk show. And he said, I'm going to bring out Dr. Raymond Moody, and he's going to discuss his book, Life After Life. I said, okay, well, what's that? But I really wasn't paying attention. And then he comes out and he starts to read or tell excerpts from this book he wrote. And I jumped off the couch and I said, my wife looked at me and we knew instantly, because at the age of 17 in 1972, if there were any writings, and there may have been, about what we now call NDEs, near-death experiences, I wasn't aware of them. So my experience stood out in isolation from everything around me. I knew it happened, but it was hard. I could only tell my family and friends. And they, maybe they took it with a grain of salt. I probably wouldn't have believed me if I heard it, to be honest with you. And then, of course, fast forwarding, I won't get into my life, but I had a life. I was in the Air Force. I was a police officer. I became captain of detectives in Rhode Island. I was a musician. I played in bands. I had 2 daughters and a son who was unfortunately stillborn. And I had, let me get this number right, 6 grandchildren, and I have 1 great-grandchild. I think I have this number right. And here I am in my 60s. I live in Florida. I'm semi-retired. I work part-time. My wife is retired. She was a tourism director in Newport, Rhode Island. And we had great careers, great lives. We traveled. We've been very blessed. And that brings us up to today.
I think one of the questions that my listeners may have is probably around religion. I'm not sure if you are into religion or if you're in religion, but how do you view religion in the shadow of the experience that you had? Like, is there a right religion, or does it matter?
So I was born in a family that did not practice or teach or at religion, let alone talk about God. God just wasn't discussed. And so I was raised non-religiously. And I always want to stress, my mother, she pretty much was a single parent. My father left us when we were young, but she was pretty much a single parent. And my mother apparently wasn't comfortable talking about God. And I don't flaw her for that. She probably didn't really have a reference. So I was not raised in a religion, and I was not raised anti-religiously either. So when I viewed the presences, I guess that's plural, although it may be one, and the one that I called the being of a higher order, a lot of people over the years said, was that Jesus? Well, much later in my life, I've come to believe it probably was. But at that time, I understood who Jesus was. I had done some reading, I read some of the Bible, but I was agnostic, maybe atheistic. I was somewhere between those two things. I kind of leaned towards, well, you're just a body. Well, I learned there instantly I'm not a body. So that was out the window. And I've probably come to believe that is Jesus. I currently practice no religion, but I'm fine with most people's religions as long as they don't dictate to others.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And one of the things that also, and I don't want those who are watching to miss this, because I think this is a very powerful insight. To have an NDE experience, you're at the realization where if you didn't know before, you understand I'm not the body, that I am consciousness, and that it's actually not the body that moves through experiences, it's consciousness that moves through experiences. Because I remember you saying that you had it was something that you had a thought or something, and then you found yourself moving. Well, obviously your body wasn't moving because your body wasn't there. It was consciousness uh, that was moving. And so one of the things that I subscribe to, is that consciousness is the only reality, that we are experiencing projections of what we are holding in consciousness. So when you look at it from the point of consciousness, if consciousness is, because I wrote what it, I said we become what we are conscious of. That's what I wrote down when we spoke about the ocean. So we can become conscious of being uh, a king, or or the president, or another gender, or
Yeah.
it's just about whatever you are conscious of being becomes. And so being conscious of the ocean, I believe there's a space that you can go into, maybe close your eyes and then just feel as if you are that experience. And obviously we're limited experiencing this 3D reality, experiencing this dream, but it makes so much sense to be on the other side. You actually become that experience because you are conscious of being that experience. And so really when I talk to people about shifting their life, about shifting their reality, it all starts with, okay, if I'm experiencing a dream of poverty, then I need to become conscious of being abundant, of being rich. I need to become conscious of that which I want to experience. So I just wanted to share that, but then also get your insight on it. How do you feel about
I agree completely. I wouldn't have understand these concepts at one point, and I often when I look back on my NDE, I was 17. I knew, of
it? Yeah,
course, I wasn't a body,
right.
but what I didn't realize is that I wasn't an ego. That took
Yeah.
me longer in the process. Prior to the experience, I won't say I was ego-less, I wasn't, but I did not have a
Mm.
strong ego. After that
Yeah.
experience and in the ensuing years, my ego grew and grew, and I think probably became, for me, for my comfort level, too big. And so now
Yeah.
I find myself at this age very satisfied in being able to reel the ego in, because I understand the ego is here. I understand I need the ego. I need that to function in what we call the world. I have no qualms, and we're not going to pretend that we're not experiencing the ego. But when I talk about the ego, I never think of it as an evil presence or Satan or anything like that. I think of it as maybe a concept, an organism, excuse me, that we have inhabited in order to function in this world. And it is my wish, at least currently, that could change, to have one foot in this world and one foot in what I would call the real world, the real creation. But in order to do that, I understand I need the ego. So it's been my later year goal to find a way to work with the ego while not allowing the ego to be my master.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, because I think I had to that was a shift for me to know that the ego is just a tool. The ego is an instrument. It's something that we use. And similar to what you just now said, as long as it's not using us, because that's what was going on when I shared with you that experience. Like I needed to get out of my head. I needed my ego's in control no matter what I felt like I was doing. It was taking over. So yeah, it's a great tool. Obviously, we would not have been given an ego if it did not have a divine purpose. But
Right.
if we're not
But
managing it
we
as you
we have to bring, in my opinion, we have to bring, you said divine purpose. I like divine. We have to bring the
Mhm.
divinity to the ego, because the ego
Yes,
isn't a presence, it's an operating system,
yeah,
right? So if we
absolutely,
marry the ego with our true nature, our divinity, which is our true nature, I don't
yeah,
want to say in my opinion because I actually know it to be true. There, I do have
yeah,
opinions, plenty of them, but in this case, I do know we are of a divine nature. I've met the divine beings. I understand I'm not a body.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's powerful. That's powerfully the way you put that, Wayne. And that's something that for those who are watching, something that maybe if you haven't considered it before, maybe something to sit down take a moment, be quiet, and consider that for a moment. That as long it's a great tool to have. It gives us preference, and so it's amazing tool for soul to operate in, for consciousness to use
Right.
to create this again. I always refer to it as a dream experience, but to create whatever we want to in this reality, in
Yeah.
this life, in this dream experience.
The older I get, the more I'm filled with a sense of gratitude for everything that has happened to me. And when I say that, I understand some of it has been what we would call a bad experience. Many bad experiences, we all have them, right? Of various natures. But I have a daughter, I have two daughters, but one of my daughters lost her husband when he was in his 30s and has two children, and she was left to deal with that. And she wants to write a book called The Blessings of Cancer, if you can believe that, because she said without her husband dying, she could not have been catapulted into this spiritual realm that has done so much for her. I know that will sound
Yeah.
very bizarre to some people, and I understand that, I really do, but I recognize what she's saying because I have to have gratitude for everything that's occurred around me, and that's all of it. Because if we only had gratitude for the good things, well, I guess it would be all about fancy cars, money, and beaches, right? And then
Right,
we
right.
wouldn't really have an experience that we're calling life. Well, I guess we would, but it's not an experience I would choose, and I don't believe I have.
Right. I agree. And I apologize to those watching. I got this bee is circling
I'm
me.
watching him.
Um,
Don't let him land on
yeah,
him.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But you open up my mind to even something more, Wayne, when, it's an unfortunate experience to lose someone, um, especially when especially, you've had experiences with them. But some of my NDE experiences, interviewees have talked about pre-birth planning, meaning there are certain things that we agreed to before we came here for the purpose of the expansion and the evolution of our ego. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't grieve someone or whether it's a relationship that breaks up, or whether it's some illness that I'm dealing with, or whether it's the loss
Right.
of a loved one. But it's the understanding that in back of that, this there's a great possibility that this was planned for the purpose of something greater. So even when you said she was thinking about writing a book, like, and even I think about my experiences that led me to be this version of myself. It wasn't like a parade that went down the street and go, "Hey, James, you should do this." It was in deep pain. It was in deep, deep hurt that this version of James emerged. And so I personally, I believe that we plan these experiences with the people that are involved in it. It's like, okay, at this point, um, I'm going to depart the earth, but this is what it's going to mean for you, and this is how you're going to evolve and grow as a part of it. Or at this point, we're going to separate and break up. Or at this point, you're going to have this illness, but it's going to
I
do this for
believe
you.
that
Because when,
to be completely
yeah,
true. I think exactly
yeah,
what you're saying is what I believe. Now, that being said,
yeah,
I wasn't one of those people, and I'm very familiar with the people you're talking about. It's
yeah,
fascinating that some of them planned out acne at the age of 16, that they would have a
yeah.
limp, that they would get in a car accident, that they would. I know one gentleman that he would kill his family, part of his
Wow,
family in a
wow.
car accident,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
wow, just wow.
Yeah, but it takes you to the place back to where we're kind of circling back to where we started from. When you recognize I'm not the body, you also recognize I'm not the experience. I am the one as consciousness, as soul, who is witnessing
Yes.
this. Like I've had two cancer patients because I'm also a healer. I've had two cancer patients that came to me within the last year. Both of them are cancer free now. And I remember telling one, I did two different processes with them. I told the first one, you don't have cancer. you are soul. You could never be. And it's being able to separate the observer and the witnesser from the experience that is being observed and witnessed. So it's almost, it happened, but did it happen to you, the soul, the consciousness, the divine being? Of course not. It's really, in some ways, not so much different. And again, I'm not, I think my listeners and watchers know I don't invalidate anybody's experience. Um, it's definitely real as we're experiencing it. But again, it just goes back to, did it happen to you, or was it just an appearance that took place, but it wasn't the truth? So,
I see it the same way. And as I progress in this life, I see it more and more that way. I'm also aware that I can do something with my ego, not all the time. If I can
right.
do it all the time, I will have gotten to where I want to be, where I feel my ego is taking over for whatever reason, and maybe an argument with my wife, maybe a disagreement with somebody, maybe just a bad day at work or something. I'm able to now, more times than not, look down from above, and I can perceive my ego doing this, which gives me a chance to catch my breath and pause and just say, okay, I see you, but it's not going to happen today. I'm
I
not
love
fighting.
that.
I'm not
Yeah,
fighting.
I
I'm
love that.
trying to be friends.
Yeah, right. I think Wayne, even especially in the moment, but even if we at the end of the day or at some point pause and go, wait, who was that? Was that me, or was
Uh-huh.
that the ego pretending to be me?
Yes.
Um, to be able to have that, and that's going to expand your soul, expand your life, expand, who you are. Wayne, I just appreciate talking to you. Go ahead.
Oh, no, no, I'm just listening to what you're saying, and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, that
100% on the same level. And I was thinking to myself how various people, I hate to use the word level. I hate that word. It sounds like you're staging yourself above somebody, but on a certain plane, on a certain plane.
yeah.
And I'm
Mhm.
aware that a lot of people around me aren't on that plane. And I'm very comfortable
Yeah,
with that. I'm not here to persuade anybody to do anything or think any certain way. What I'm really here for is to be truly helpful, however I can do
yeah,
that. The best way I can be helpful is usually, for one thing, because of my ego, to be a little more quiet than I was in the past.
yeah.
And secondly, just to bless, comprehend, and be present for people.
Yeah, yeah. Because in that space, we now give them room to expand and grow. And I talk about it like this. I call it an ascension journey, because we're all at different points on the journey. We're all going to arrive at the same place,
That's
right?
how
But
I
we're
see
just
it.
at different, yeah. And so even when I talk about higher consciousness, I talk about maybe people like you, or, and it doesn't matter where you're at on the ladder. I talk about being able to reach the top shelf for people who can't reach the top shelf, and then bring that down to them. But then also, and I believe you're saying the same thing, and I definitely want the listeners to get this, that if you come across people who they they call what you talk about crap, or whatever, that just means that they haven't reached that level of consciousness yet. They will at some point, but it's not for us to try to convince them, try to argue with them, judge them. That's just, they get to be there, and it gets to be okay.
That's right.
But once we enter into the argument, the trying to reason with them, now we are lowering, or we're regressing in our journey, so that we can meet them where they are. When, as you are talking about, Wayne, as long as we hold space for them, we hold space for them to have the opportunity to grow and reach those higher
I
levels.
agree. And the part where it can make some people uncomfortable is, you alluded
Mm.
to it earlier, is that we are all
Mhm.
going to get there. And so when you
Yeah,
use the word all, it bothers some people
yeah,
because they
yeah,
want to have a separate camp that includes some
yeah.
members, but not other members. And I won't get into specifics. I don't want to do that.
No, I get it. I get it. I get it. And I think
Yeah.
those who are watching who get it as well. Well, Wayne, this is just, this was conversation was better than I expected. I don't know if better
I really
is the
enjoyed
perfect.
talking to you. It was
Yeah,
fantastic.
I did as well. I feel like I got some things. I know some of the things you shared are some of the questions that my listeners have had. So yeah, I just appreciate you so much, Wayne. And I'll end with this. If there's one thing that you would say, I want people to get this, whether from your life today or from the experience that you had, it's like, I want to make sure I leave people with this. What would that be?
It would be this, that you have no reason to fear. And even though fear is going to visit us, and that includes me, I'm not claiming I'm
Yeah,
fearless, but
yeah,
in my mind and in my heart, those are two different things. I know and I believe that we will never die. We are infinite. We are creations of God. We will live forever. We are, in fact, just moving through this, and we will move through it, all the bad, all the good. And when we leave, what I suggest we do, like the Beatles said, in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. So I'll leave it
I
with the
love
Beatles
that.
quote.
So, Wayne, having said that, for people that resonate with your story, just love your energy like I do, how can people reach you or get in touch with you? And it will also be in the description below. But how can people get in touch with you?
Great, I appreciate that. I have a site that I've had for the last year on YouTube called The Wisdom Years, Wayne Morrison. And if they do a search on YouTube, they'll find that. I also have one on TikTok, same thing, The Wisdom Years, Wayne Morrison.
I love that. And just FYI, for those who are watching, I checked out the YouTube site that Wayne is talking about. Some good stuff on there. I'm going to go back and circle back and look at some of the videos again as well. So, having said that, as I always say to my listeners, definitely return back for more amazing NDE stories. And as always, also don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. But as always, I love you and I appreciate you. And both Wayne and I say, goodbye for now.